your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man, Louie Tee, aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale, single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series as we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Steelers, next, Pitt, next, Pittsburgh, next, Steel Curtain, next. You get where I'm going. As a matter of fact, next team up in the series is none other than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And 2019 is going to be an intriguing season for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially if the regular season is as fascinating and breathtaking as the offseason was for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, the big news, really probably the biggest story of the offseason, was the Antonio Brown saga with the Steelers ultimately ending in his trading to the Oakland Raiders, which promptly landed the Raiders on Hard Knocks, which shows you just how much power Antonio Brown has in terms of eyeballs. People are really intrigued by what he brings to the table in Oakland. Don't know if he's going to make them a playoff team, but we know the production that this guy brings to the table and what he's capable of. And the Steelers lost a chunk of their production offensively when Antonio Brown moved on and was moved for relatively next to nothing. They were put in a corner, but not one that they had to relent and give into. But look, that's another story for another day. I've talked about it ad nauseum on my podcast, so I'm not going to do that here. Bottom line is they rid themselves of a locker room cancer, a guy that they needed to move in order for them to have peace and sanctity in their locker room. And so now they're going to move forward without Antonio Brown. What does life after A.B. look like? We're going to find out in 2019. However, there are still a number of guys that can get it done in this locker room. And so the Steelers are going to move forward with what they have. Now the question is, do they have enough? And we're going to find out a lot about some of these other players that I think benefited because of Antonio Brown. Couldn't put 8 in the box because you had to make sure you kept a guy over the top of A.B. Now that's not the case, even though Juju Smith-Schuster looks like he's a bona fide number one. Was he just eating off of what A.B. was providing, or is he a legit number one threat in this league? We are going to find out together. It's going to make for some very compelling theater watching the Steelers in 2019, but there were some changes that had to be made. There were some upgrades at specific positions that needed to be addressed going into this offseason. They've done that through the draft and free agency. So this is a team that looks like they're back on track to be a much more competitive team in 2019. We're not accustomed to the Steelers missing the postseason. They do it from time to time. All right, this isn't a team that makes it every single year, but it's not many years that the Steelers missed the postseason. They did that in 2018. They're looking to bounce back in 2019. And I'd say, sans for Antonio Brown's departure, this has been a really good offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers with some of the moves made in free agency and the draft. I think they've gotten better as a whole. Again, sans for losing Antonio Brown. I can't state that enough. But in any event, let's talk about the Steelers and where they are and what this draft has done for them by taking a look at their 2019 NFL draft. And we start in the first round, 10th overall selection, linebacker out of Michigan, Devin Bush is the pick. So I talked about Devin Bush on my breakdown. I'm not going to break him down here as I've already done so on the Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of Devin Bush and all the other prospects I was able to get to prior to the draft, go to the playlist section on the Louie Tee Network. Find the 2019 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series. There you will find a thorough, extensive breakdown of every single prospect I was able to get to prior to the draft, Devin Bush being one of them. As a matter of fact, I got to both of the Devins at the linebacker position. And my findings were that this was the better of the two Devins. I know I'm in the minority with that opinion, and that's fine by me. I don't care what other people think of my opinion. It's my opinion. And what I'm telling you is that I felt like the better of the two Bushes, Devins, was Devin Bush. Now, that being said, he's still 5'10". He's still 230 pounds. He's still undersized for the position. But in today's NFL, shy schmize, who really gives a damn how big these guys are anymore? Teams are going with more speed on the field. That seems to be the thing that's winning the day in the NFL now. And so the more of it you have on the field, the better you have a chance to succeed. The Steelers have really been lacking in that department at the linebacker position specifically since the injury to Ryan Shazier. And I'm glad to see his progress and where he's come from where he was after the injury. And I don't know if he'll ever play football again, but I can tell you this much. The Steelers have been hurting at the linebacker position and looking to fill that void. I think they may have done it. And it's good that they went out and addressed it in free agency just in case this opportunity didn't arise in the draft. They went out and got Mark Barron in free agency, and I think he's going to come in and help. And again, another smallish, undersized linebacker when you're talking about weight. Mark Barron, more of a safety in terms of his body type than a linebacker. But again, he's one of those new age hybrid safety linebackers that have played and been successful in this league. And so the Steelers, again, in their quest to get faster at the linebacker position, have done human-like work to upgrade the position. So now you're looking at a starting inside linebacker group of Barron and now the addition of Devin Bush. I think you've gotten exponentially faster, which is going to help your defense to take a quantum leap from where they've been, because to me, when the Steelers are at their best, their linebackers, both inside and out, are fast, aggressive, and flowing to the football. You're going to get that with these two guys inside now in Devin Bush and with Mark Barron. So I think the linebacker position has been upgraded. Let's take linebacker off of your needs list, and I'll quickly go through the needs that I have for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this draft. Wide receiver, you could argue, not the biggest need for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to argue that it is the biggest need. Now, obviously, you still have Juju Smith-Schuster, and I think he's going to assume the number one wide receiver role in Pittsburgh. Again, we don't know that he can handle that load. We've seen him dominate, but in a number two capacity. What is he going to do when all the eyeballs and all the attention is now on him? We're going to see if he still is lighting up teams and doing some of the things we've seen him do in the past, but now he's going to be past the number one wide receiver baton. Let's see if he runs with it or if he stalls out. That being said, you look at the next guys up on the list. What is James Washington? Is he a guy that you can count on? You drafted him in the, second, third round a couple of years ago. Is he legit, or is he a guy that you wasted a pick on? We're going to find out. I think this is the year you got to find out about James Washington and know if you got something or not. In free agency, you went out, you got a guy that I've always liked, but injury has always been his downfall in Deante Moncrief. If he's healthy, I think Deante Moncrief can actually be a very big acquisition for you. The problem is you don't know if Deante Moncrief is going to stay healthy or not. Thus, I don't know if I can trust him. It's nice to have Switzer and all these other guys you may have on the roster, but I just don't know if you have enough production or not. And so that's why receiver for me is number one on this list. Then you go to tight end. Look, you lost Jesse James in free agency. Boo-hoo-hoo. It's not the biggest deal in the world. I get it. But with Vance McDonald being a guy that, just like I talked about with Deante Moncrief, a guy you can't count on to be healthy all the time. And I don't know about you, but Xavier Grimble doesn't make me tremble as a defender. I'd much rather add something at the tight end position to make me a little bit more comfortable with what's there. So that's why tight end for me is number two on this list. Maybe a little high, you could argue. I think it's at its right spot at the number two position in this draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Edge rusher, you never have enough edge rushers. The Steelers don't have enough edge rushers. They've got two as it stands, and I don't even think they love one of them in Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree! And the other one in TJ Watt, I think, is coming along very nicely. And so you got two. I don't think you have anybody else after those two. So you could use one or two more edge rushers, as a matter of fact. But one will do for now. One will be fine. One will suffice. But you needed to add an edge rusher, and that you did in this draft. I don't know if he's actually going to help you this year or not, but you added an edge rusher. And nonetheless, linebacker, as you see here, you added a big-time player in Devin Bush. You traded up to do it. That's how much you loved Devin Bush. You traded all the way up to number 10 with the Denver Broncos to get him. So you gave up second-round capital, and you knew what you were getting yourself into, but it was something that you felt like you needed to do to get a player that you absolutely loved in this draft. I don't have a problem with it. And so they actually attacked linebacker yet again later on in the draft. So they double dipped. That lets you know how much they felt like they needed to upgrade that position. Safety is a position that the Steelers have been swinging and missing at for quite some time, going back to the Shamarko Thomas days. They just haven't been able to figure it out. They've got some pieces. They've got some guys. You're just not sure where every guy fits in the rotation. The Steelers have never been opposed to putting 3 safeties on the field at once. Right now, they really only have 2 guys that they trust. So I thought safety was a position that they could add. Maybe they like some of the younger guys that they've added over the last couple of years, and they think those guys are going to develop, and this is the year that they take a huge step forward. And so maybe they didn't think that safety was a big need. It's not a big need, as it's the 5th need, the 5th biggest need, but nonetheless, I thought it was a need, and you could have added some safety depth. You could also argue that you could have added some more depth at corner. I mean, I kind of wrestled back and forth with those 2 things. I decided to land on safety because I thought that cornerback, you've just invested too much over the years in corner, and you've got some veteran money tied up into the cornerback position. I just didn't think you were going to do anything there. And then running back, to me, they're trying to go back to the days of just bludgeoning teams to death. You've got a big physical, and again, Le'Veon Bell with some more offseason drama, but not really. More of that drama was last year than this past offseason, but still, he's gone officially to the Jets, and so you needed to do something at the running back position. You've got one guy already in James Conner. You got the NC State product as well. He's solid, but I don't think you had a guy that you trust necessarily as a backup option. If anything would have happened to James Conner, now you do have that guy that you drafted in this year's draft, and I think it's a great move by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the only real thing you're missing at the running back position now is speed, but nonetheless, you got a lot of power, and that's the identity of this Steelers team in any event. So that's Devin Bush. I already talked about Devin Bush. Not going to break him down. Love this pick. Think this was an excellent selection by the Steelers. I don't mind coming up to get him because it was a guy that you identified as a difference maker at the linebacker position, something you have lacked since the departure and, like I said, the injury to Ryan Shazier. So you needed to do something. This was your solution to the problem. I absolutely love it. And so in the first round, 10th overall selection, linebacker out of Michigan, Devin Bush, who reminds me, my comp for him, if you haven't watched the video, is London Fletcher. A lot of people forget because it's so long ago. London Fletcher came in the league out of John F. Carroll that the guy was running a sub 4.5, a 4.47 or something along those lines, 4.44. And so he's right on par with Devin Bush and his athleticism. You know, London Fletcher was undersized. That was a big problem. That's no longer the case in today's NFL. Undersized, underschmized, whatever. Devin Bush, for me, is a no-doubter. And so,
hits it high, hits it deep, it is out of here!
So for me with the Pittsburgh Steelers in this particular draft, I deemed it the chasing the ghost draft. And I'll tell you in a second why I deemed it and coined it the chasing the ghost draft for them. But I just feel like they're chasing players of Steelers past lore, if you will. And to me, this is a prime example of trying to replace what you just had. So many similarities here with this player that you're getting, but I don't think he's the guy that you want him to be. But we'll see. We'll see what he turns out to be. 3rd round, 66th overall pick, wide receiver out of Toledo. Deante Johnson is the pick. So let's be really candid with each other right now, all right? The Steelers drafted this guy to be Antonio Brown's replacement. Not necessarily in production right away, but they drafted him as an Antonio Brown clone, essentially. Both players played in the MAC. Antonio Brown, a 5th-round selection out of Central Michigan. Deante Johnson out of Toledo. Okay, so both played in the MAC. Both right around 5'10", 5'11", both right around about $185, $190. And remember, Antonio Brown, not the biggest guy in the world. I think a lot of people forget because of how dominant he's been in his career. He's not a big guy. He's not 6'1". He's not 6'2", which is what you usually see with these dominant receivers. It's a smaller guy. Remember, Antonio Brown came into the league and even had some success with the Steelers as a punt returner, and he could do some different things with the football in his hands. He was dynamic, yards after catch. Deante Johnson, similar situation. So again, the similarities are glaring. They're off the charts, but he's not Antonio Brown. Let me repeat, he is not A.B. Not many guys are, so I'm not saying much there, but I think the Steelers view him as a guy that could potentially grow into an Antonio Brown role in this offense. We shall see. Let's take receiver off the board. Obviously, I thought it was a big need. The Steelers did too. That's why they took a receiver with their second pick in this draft. And so, a wide receiver with tremendous versatility that can handle multiple roles on a roster. Johnson can serve as a kick returner, 2 career touchdowns as a kick returner, one in each of the last 2 seasons. So this is a guy that's dynamic as a kick returner. Also, he can double as a punt returner, 2 career touchdowns there in that department as well. And just like with the kick returning situation, 2 of them in his career, 1 in each of the last 2 seasons, or either of the 3 wide receiver positions. You can play out wide as a 1-2 or a slot guy. So you're looking at a guy that can do everything on the football field, essentially, from a wide receiver standpoint. His size or speed doesn't scream playmaker, but with the ball in his hands, he's dangerous and has enough speed to hurt NFL defenses. His catch radius is limited, and he can struggle to catch the ball outside of his frame from time to time. The likelihood of a big play is greater than a boo-boo with Johnson, which makes him a weapon that could be devastating at the NFL level. So, a couple of criticisms and critiques. Again, not a big catch radius because he's a shorter receiver and doesn't have tremendously long arms. And I saw him drop the football a couple of times away from his frame, going up, climbing the ladder, wasn't able to come down with the football. One behind him slightly as he's crossing the middle of the football field, wasn't able to reach back and grab it. These are all things you expect elite wide receivers to be able to do on a consistent basis. Every pass isn't going to be perfect. You expect these guys to find a way to come down with the football. I am very hard on wide receivers. It's my favorite position to critique and watch film on. And so I am very critical of receivers, hypercritical even. And there were some things that I didn't love necessarily with Deante Johnson, but that's why he's sitting here in the 3rd round. That's why he's not a 2nd or a 1st round pick. But that being said, he brings a lot of value to the table, gives you a little bit of positional flexibility with what he brings to the table from a special team standpoint, a wide receiver standpoint. The more this guy can take in terms of knowledge of the offense in different positions at the receiver position, he can help you right away. I'll be anxious to see how they use him and when the depth chart comes out through training camp, where he ends up on this depth chart, because I'm interested to see what's going on with James Washington. This is a guy I'm interested to see what he's going to do and where he's going to play and be most effective. You still got Ryan Switzer in the slot, so does he take Ryan Switzer's spot? Again, a lot of questions to be answered. I can't wait to see what happens with Deante Johnson. But my comp for him is Eddie Royal. I don't know if a lot of you remember Eddie Royal out of Virginia Tech. Was a really good receiver in this league for many years. Was never great, but really solid. Also was a dangerous return man as well. Spent a number of years in Denver with the Chargers. And so this is a guy that, in Deante Johnson, that has some ability. Want to see how he performs in a black and yellow uniform. But nonetheless, 3rd round, 66th overall selection, wide receiver out of Toledo. Deante Johnson, for me, is... So we move on to the next 3rd round selection for the Pittsburgh Steelers, 83rd overall. Defensive back out of Michigan State, Justin Lane is the pick. So I told you that I thought that the Steelers probably could use cornerback help. Didn't think they were going to invest in the cornerback position. But they did. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is my favorite pick of the Steelers draft. I love Devin Bush as a football player. I think he's going to be a stud at the NFL level. But this is my favorite pick of the draft because, to me, this is a guy that has been slept on for far too long during this process. When you talk about the bigger corners in this draft, and there were quite a few: Isaiah Johnson, Lonnie Johnson, um, uh, uh, Justin Lane. There are a few more names out there. Greedy Williams is a bigger corner with some length. There are a number of bigger corners, 6'1" or better in this draft. But to me, the smoothest of them all might be Justin Lane. Maybe Greedy Williams is smoother, but I'll take Justin Lane in terms of just being a pure cover corner that's not handsy down the field. Greedy Williams can get himself into trouble by putting his hands on receivers at times down the field. I still think Greedy Williams is a better man-to-man cover than Justin Lane, but when you're talking about all-around game, when you're talking about these bigger corners in this particular draft, for me, Justin Lane just does it. I just feel like this guy is going to be really good at the next level, and I feel like you're chasing a ghost here as well with Justin Lane. You're looking for another Ike Taylor. You're looking for a longer, bigger corner, not afraid to tackle, that can man up the outside for years to come. Again, you really haven't had that guy since the departure of Ike Taylor. It's been a while in Pittsburgh where you've had consistency at the cornerback position. It's not for a lack of trying. You've tried over the years. Guys haven't been able to stay healthy. Guys haven't been able to perform up to the level that you have set for them. And so I think this is the guy that might put all of that to rest. Obviously, you've got Joe Hayden right now as a veteran leading the group of corners that you do already have. This is a guy that I really, really like, and I think he's going to step in and be a big-time contributor for you for many years to come. And so a smooth 6'2" cornerback with a wide receiver background that serves him well. Easy mover with fluid hips and solid awareness. His ability to locate the ball in flight helps him win many reps. His willingness to tackle is somewhat surprising and refreshing given his ex-wide receiver background. And I love his interception or his PBU to interception ratio. Generally, I want it to be lower than 10-1. Anything over 10-1, anything 10-1 or over to me is a little bit underwhelming. Anything lower than 10-1 and you're right in my neighborhood. I love it. He's 8-1, 24 PBUs in his career, 3 interceptions. So that's fine by me. Because what you don't want a guy doing is knocking the football away all the time. That means he's not picking off passes at a high enough clip. If the guy has, 37 PBUs but only 1 interception, that's terrible. That means you're always around the ball, but you're not making plays on the ball. You get what I'm saying? So you want guys that find a way to come down with enough of these things to make you feel comfortable, and Justin Lane did that. And you watch him against Ohio State. I thought he was exceptional in that game. You watch him on tape against Penn State. And this guy he's a baller, man. He's a ball player. I just love what Justin Lane brings to the table. I think this guy is going to be an outstanding pro. My comp for him, a guy you know all too well in Baltimore, in Jimmy Smith. Now, this guy looks the part of a Jimmy Smith, plays the game similar to Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith, to me, is a really smooth corner. When he's healthy, he's really good. I think Justin Lane can be that kind of guy for this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And I love the fact that this guy's an ex-wide receiver, so he kind of understands route concepts, what receivers are trying to do. And also, take it a step further, I said it in my breakdown of him, that I was surprised at how physical he was. Because generally, when you make that switch from wide receiver to cornerback, you want no parts of contact. You don't want to get in there and mix it up. But this guy looks like he's been playing defense his entire life. And so I love that about Justin Lane as well. I love this pick. I'm not going to lie to you. I think this guy's going to be a stud. And so in the 3rd round, 83rd pick overall, defensive back out of Michigan State, Justin Lane for me is.
Hits one high. Hits it deep. It is out of here.
So we move on to the 4th round, 122nd pick overall, running back out of Kentucky, Benny Snell is the selection. So I've already broken down Benny Snell in my Draft Prospects 101 series, so I'm not going to do that here, but I can tell you this. The Steelers are going back to the old hammer approach. They are hitting you with the hammer, and then when you're done getting hit with that hammer in James Conner, they're just going to bring out an even bigger hammer and hit you even more with Benny Snell. And they've also got Jalen Samuels, and he's not a small guy either. So they're looking to batter and bruise some teams. They're not looking to pussyfoot around. They're not looking to try to run around you. They're trying to run through you. And they've got the right guys to do that. Guys that are going to wear you down over 4 quarters of play. And when it gets cold in December and January, when it gets tiring in the 4th quarter, late in the game, these are the guys that are going to pound the rock and bruise you up and finish the job. And so I don't have a problem with it. That's Pittsburgh Steelers football going back to the days of Jerome Bettis and the bus. That's what they used to do to teams. Wear them down physically, beat them up defensively, beat them up offensively, and beat them down with a physical run game. And looks like they're kind of bringing that back now with James Conner as their lead dog and now adding Benny Snell Jr. To the mix. Snell, for the Pittsburgh Steelers here in the 4th round, 122nd pick overall. Let's take running back off the board as the Steelers knock down yet another need in this draft. 122nd pick overall, running back out of Kentucky. Benny Snell for me is my comp for Benny Snell, just in case you haven't watched the video, was Eddie Lacy. He reminds me a lot of Eddie Lacy when he first came in the league. Remember, Eddie Lacy was like rookie of the year when he first came in the league and rushed for over 1,000 yards. That Eddie Lacy, not the one that was the cheeseburglar that ate his way out of the league, Eddie Lacy. Think of Eddie Lacy coming into the league out of Alabama that was dominant, not the Eddie Lacy that came after that Eddie Lacy and ate that Eddie Lacy. So we move on to the 5th round, 141st pick overall. Tight end out of Michigan, Zach Gentry is the pick. So yet again, another chasing the ghost selection for the Steelers in this draft. You already know who they're trying to depict here with this pick. Obviously, they're looking to try to chase the ghost of Heath Miller past. And with the Zach Gentry pick here, another big tight end that can catch the football, that they're hoping can get the blocking thing down pat, because Zach Gentry, not a very, very good blocker at this point of his career, but he's willing. He's just not very good at it right now. But this is a guy that is an ex-quarterback, so you can understand some of the struggles at the tight end position with Zach Gentry, but you got to like his size and his athleticism and some of the rawness, because you feel like if you can get your hands on him and you can coach him up and get him to understand some of the nuances of blocking and route running and things of that nature, you may have something here, because he's a really good athlete for his size. 6'8", 265. That's a big man right there. 34-inch arm, so you get a nice catch radius, and a 4'7", 240. So all of these things add up to a guy that you really like with his size. A massive framed potential combo tight end prospect who's just scratching the surface as a tight end. An ex-quarterback recruit to Michigan, Gentry converted to tight end and put his big frame to use in Jim Harbaugh's offense. However, Gentry's hands and focus can be fleeting at times, which is frustrating, and despite his size, he blocks like an ex-quarterback. But his size and athleticism can't be taught. And thus, Gentry is a player that could have some mid to late round value, hence the 5th round selection here by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's take tight end off the board. I thought this was a position that the Steelers needed to address. They could have addressed it earlier, but they decided to address it later. And this was a deep tight end draft class. Zach Gentry wasn't one of the guys on my radar per se. When you're talking about the tight end position, there were so many guys, whether you're talking about the 2 Iowa boys and Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, you're talking about the Ole Miss tight end, you're talking about Sternberger out of Texas A&M, Trevon Wesco came on late from West Virginia. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You know, Dawson Knox as well, I was talking about out of Ole Miss. There were so many really quality tight ends in this draft that you could have got your hands on. Maybe Zach Gentry turns into one of those guys. I'm not sure if I believe that quite yet. There are a lot of things that are frustrating and maddening about him. Watching him, the Ohio State game, there's about 3 drops in that game. There's some, and I talked about focus and hands being an issue for him. There's some concentration lapses with Zach Gentry from time to time. And that's aside from the blocking issues that he's got to get under control. But there's stuff to work with here, and that's probably the most important thing, is that this is a guy that has the tools that you would love to work with and get your hands on. And if he turns out to be the guy that you have projected him to be, you could get yourself a massive steal here in the 5th round. 141st pick overall, tight end out of Michigan. Zach Gentry, for me, is my comp for Zach Gentry is Blake Jarwin, a tight end that the Dallas Cowboys are really starting to take a liking to. Big guy, athletically gifted, can catch it out of Oklahoma State. But he had to work at catching the football a little bit better. He didn't come in with A1 hands. And I think that's the same case for Zach Gentry. And Blake Jarwin has really started to come along and blossom. You're hoping that by year 2 or 3 with Zach Gentry, he starts to blossom and give you some really good production. As we go to the 6th round now, 175th pick overall, edge rusher out of Northern Illinois, Sutton Smith is the selection. So this is an intriguing pick here by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 6th round in Sutton Smith. I don't know if he's going to make the football team. I don't know what the Steelers have in mind. But let's first, before we get to all of that, take edge rusher off the board as they address that need here with the addition of Sutton Smith. He's going to get an opportunity, obviously, as a draft pick. 6 feet, 233, 4'6", 40, 31-inch arms. All of these things spell doom for this guy making the team as an edge rusher. Look, I talked about the NFL going to faster, going to guys that can make plays with their speed, but not at the edge rushing position. That's one of those positions that, just like offensive line, it's timeless to have guys that are long with the kind of length and the size you're looking for, the girth. All of those things do matter in the trenches. As a linebacker, you can roam free, you can run unmolested because of the big nasties up front, taking on blockers and eating up space and blockers to give you a chance to roam free. Not so much as an edge rusher. You're going to contact a tight end or a tackle or a guard or somebody. And at 233 pounds, that's no way to live in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see. It's one thing to do damage in the MAC as he did, and I'm going to get to that in a second, because did he do damage? I mean, boy, did he ever. I mean, this is impressive here, his body of work. But and it warranted getting a chance in the league. You know, when you put up these types of numbers, you deserve an opportunity to show what you can do at the next level. But at 6 feet, 233, you're hoping he's James Harrison. You know, that's what you're hoping. This guy turns out to be another undersized edge rusher that turns it up, you know, Elvis Dumerville style, if you will. But nonetheless, ultra productive, yet undersized ex-high school running back turned edge rushing prospect. When I say ultra productive, I mean ultra productive. 30 career sacks, 58 tackles for loss, 6 forced fumbles, and 2 block kicks as a little cherry on top. This guy was putting in work, including a 15-sack season in 2018 to put an exclamation point on his Northern Illinois career. High motor, high energy, relentless pass rusher who doesn't actually have a plan other than get to the quarterback. So this guy isn't saying, yeah, I'm going to set him up with a couple of speed rushes to the outside, and then I'm going to spin on him, or then I'm going to go hard outside, back inside. He's just like, F it. They snap the ball. I'm going to just try to find a way to get to the quarterback. That shit doesn't work at the next level. He's going to have to come up with a pass rushing plan. That being said, worked very well in the MAC, but he'll have to be a little bit more crafty at the NFL level. Slips blocks well to penetrate the backfield and blow up plays, but once again, not sure if that will work at the next level, but anxious to see if it will or not. This is a guy that as I said here, I'm anxious to see if he'll work in the NFL or not because he's so relentless. All right. He's one of those guys that just won't take no for an answer. He's the equivalent of a telemarketer that just has a rebuttal for every remark that you have. No. Well, sir, we've got a couple of specials. No, I'm good. Well, if you do this, he's got a move. He's got some more hustle for every time he gets blocked. And at some point, that wears down offensive linemen, and he's going to win just off of his energy and his zest and life for the game and get into the backfield. And he does a great job of slipping blocks, engaging and then getting around a guy and getting to the ball carrier. You don't end up with over 50 tackles for loss, damn near 60 in your career. And again, 30 sacks, 30 of them are sacks because they count sacks as tackle for losses in college football. But there's still another 28 to be unaccounted for. And I watched at least 6 or 7 of them on tape where I'm like, wow, that's impressive. Guy that's twice his size, not twice his size, but you get where I'm going. A guy that's literally 315 pounds is engaged with him, and he finds a way to get around him. That's impressive. And so I'm anxious to see what Sutton Smith can bring to the table here as a 6th-round pick, 775th overall selection, edge rusher out of Northern Illinois. Sutton Smith, for me, is... So we move on to the 6th round, yet again, 192nd pick overall, defensive lineman out of Alabama. Isaiah Buggs is the pick. So you go ahead and disregard that weight and size you see on the artwork there. I did that way back at the beginning of the process before we got the true measurements at the combine. Just took the listing off of the Alabama website. You know how it goes with schools. They always make these players a lot bigger and a lot, depending on what you're looking for, a lot bigger than what they really are. Hell, I was 6'2" in high school. I ain't been an inch over 6 feet a day in my life, but that's what you do. You fabricate. And so he's a 6'3", 306-pound defensive lineman. I think he played at more closer to 290, 295. So the weight's not that far off. I think he put on some weight at the combine to show these teams that, hey, I can be whatever you need me to be. If I need to kick inside, if that's my best position, I'm game for the challenge at 306 pounds. So he was a cog on the Alabama defense that wasn't as good as it's been in the past, but the Bugs tallied 11 sacks over the last 2 years at Bama, including a 9.5 sack season in 2018 to end his Alabama career, which shows the ability to get to the passer. That was as a 290-pound defensive end, 295, somewhere in there, pound defensive end. At the pro level, he'll either be kicked inside to a defensive tackle, or he'll be a 5 technique in a base 3-4 defense, which is what the Pittsburgh Steelers play. So I'm going to presume that he's going to be a guy you throw into the mix, if he in fact makes this team, into the mix, into the rotation as one of your 5 techs as a defensive end along that defensive line. Either way, he's shown the ability to be a solid contributor with talent around him. I'm not sure if Isaiah Buggs is the guy that makes the defense talented, or if he's one of the guys that eats because the defense is talented. We're going to find out here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. If he's able to make this roster, first and foremost, he's going to have to stand out in training camp, and he's going to have to do it with guys that are less talented around him on the 2nd and 3rd teams in the preseason. If he can show that talent that he has stands alone and isn't dependent on other talent around him, he'll make this football team. If he's just another body out on the football field, the Steelers have enough bodies along the defensive line that Isaiah Buggs isn't a guy that necessarily has to make this team at this present time. So I'll be anxious to see if this guy is actually really good, or if the talent around him needs to be really good for him to then be really good. We'll see. But nonetheless, he's a guy that got to the quarterback in college. Let's see if he can do it at the NFL level. 6th round, 192nd pick overall, defensive lineman out of Alabama, Isaiah Buggs, for me is my comp for Isaiah Buggs is the Arizona Cardinals defensive lineman Rodney Gunter, a guy that was drafted out of Delaware State, has played really well for the Cardinals of late. At his best season to date in 2018, he's ascending as a football player. You're hoping to see the same production and ascension out of Isaiah Buggs. We move on to the 6th round yet again. So 3 6th-round picks for the Steelers in this draft. 207th overall selection. Linebacker out of Akron, Ulysses Gilbert is the pick. So yet again, another undersized linebacker that the Steelers have decided to bring into the mix. And if you haven't gotten the picture by now, I think the Steelers have painted the picture for you very, very brightly. They are looking to get faster at the linebacker position. It is not a secret, and they're willing to trade off and do it at the expense of size if need be. Yes, they would love nothing more than a 245-pound inside linebacker that runs a 4.5 40. But that's not generally how these guys are coming out of college. All right, these guys are coming out of college running a sub 4.5 or running a sub 4.6. But they're 230 pounds. You're just going to have to live with that. In the case of Ulysses Gilbert, he is sub 230. Okay, we're talking about a 224-pound linebacker. That used to be safety size in this league. That's not even safety size anymore. That's linebacker size now. So you see how the league is evolving or changing. You call it whatever you want. But this is a guy that can run at 6 feet, 224, 32-inch arms, 4.46 40, which is blazing fast, similar to what you got in Devin Bush, and 39.5-inch vert to go along with the 10.6 broad. This guy is athletically gifted. All right, Ulysses Gilbert, an elite athleticism gives Akron linebacker Ulysses Gilbert a chance to crack an NFL roster despite his size at 6 feet 224. What's most impressive about Gilbert is his ability to sort through trash to get to the ball carrier. He has an innate knack for finding the ball amongst the trees. That, along with his coverage, ability, and special teams prowess, gives Gilbert a real shot at making an impact as a 3-down linebacker in today's NFL. And so when I watched him, he blew me away with his ability to just get to the ball carrier. It just surprised me because when you see guys like him, normally they're getting engulfed. They're getting just swallowed up, enveloped in the mass that is the offensive line, and guys are getting to the second level and wiping guys like him clean out of the play. And he just somehow finds his way through offensive linemen, through his guys, through everyone, and voila, he's at the ball carrier for a 2-yard gain, or he's at the ball carrier for a gain of 1, or no gain, or in the backfield. And I'm amazed at how often this guy is finding the ball, and it just doesn't seem like he should be getting to the rock, and he is. And that's impressive. And to me, that's a hell of a trait to have, especially as an undersized linebacker. But to take it a step further, he's a guy that, as a 4.46 guy, gives you different dimensions. You can drop into coverage. Sometimes I think he falls asleep behind the wheel in coverage. And he's one of those guys that more so plays a patch of grass than he does players running through a zone. That drives me nuts. But that's something that you can coach up. You know, that's not something that you can't coach 4.46. You either got that or you don't. What I can coach you to do is play a guy that's running through your zone and not play a patch of grass. All right, this isn't a video game. This isn't Madden. You don't just run to a spot and stand there. You play an area, and if a guy runs into your zone, you match him and you run with him until he vacates your zone. So that's something you can teach a linebacker, okay? So there's a lot of workable parts and traits here with Ulysses Gilbert. My comp for him is another fellow Akron Zip in Jatavis Brown, who was drafted by the then San Diego Chargers, now of the Los Angeles Chargers. And he was a guy that I loved coming out of Akron about 3 or 4 years ago. And Ulysses Gilbert reminds me a lot of Jatavis Brown. And so if you get the same production out of him that the Chargers have gotten out of Jatavis Brown, you should feel very, very fortunate here in the 6th round, 207th pick overall. Linebacker out of Akron, Jatavis Brown. Ulysses Gilbert, for me, is And finally, we wrap up this Steelers draft in the 7th round, 219th overall pick. The offensive lineman out of Maryland, Derwin Gray, is the pick. So, this is an intriguing pick for a number of different reasons. Size-wise, this guy checks all the boxes. 6'4", 320, 34-inch arms, 25 career starts at Maryland. I watched him against Ohio State in one particular game, and I had to really focus. I had to stop the game several times to figure out where he was. They were moving this guy around. One plays at left tackle, the next plays at right tackle. They would put so many guys, unbalanced lines, and he would be all the way at guard after they were done sticking a tackle or two on his side. There were times where you look at him, you're like, man, where the hell is this guy? I had to find him with his sleeve. He wore a white sleeve, so that was my way of identifying him. So this is a guy that isn't opposed to moving around if you need him to, but he's got left tackle ability written all over him. And this is intriguing in the 7th round. You don't usually get guys that you think, hey, man, if everything falls right, this guy could be a starter for you. Not at the tackle position. Yeah, maybe at guard or at center. You can get an undrafted guy. You can get a 6th round, 5th round, late round draft pick as an interior offensive lineman, and that guy end up starting. It's rare in this league that you find tackles that end up starting for you that isn't drafted in the first 3 rounds. Like, you want a starting tackle in this league generally. Not all the time, but generally. I'd say, and this is just some ridiculous number I'm throwing out. I don't know how accurate or even close to accuracy this is, but I'd venture to say that 85% of the starting tackles in this league, left or right, preferably left, are guys that are drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. I'm just throwing that out there. I could be really wrong there. I'm just throwing that out there. But this is a guy that if everything kind of goes right for him and he takes the coaching well and the opportunity presents itself and he takes advantage, man, this is a guy that could potentially be a starting caliber tackle in this league. I see him as a swing tackle at this very moment, which the Steelers could use in any event. But nonetheless, an intriguing offensive line prospect, a big athletic offensive lineman that has a little something to him. Doesn't sustain in the run game as much as one would like, but makes solid contact and has no issues getting to the second level. Does a bang-up job in pass pro, but can turn into a lunger every so often. But these aren't things that you can't clean up. You can get him to bend a little bit more. And sometimes guys bend naturally. He doesn't seem to be a natural bender, all right, of his knees, that is. He seems like he wants to bend at his waist at times, which is that lazy approach that gets you beat in this league. But I think that's something that you can coach him to do a little bit better. I think sustaining in the run game, sustaining at the second level, that's something you can teach him to do a little bit better as well. But him as a pass protector, he's light on his feet. He does a really good job of keeping the integrity of the pocket, washing guys around the quarterback, not allowing them to get to the quarterback. He anchors well, so the bull rush doesn't affect him as much. There's something to this guy here in the 7th round. And again, that's not something that you often hear me say when you're talking about tackles. There's usually flaws galore, and I'm like on the verge of giving that guy a single. That's not the case here with Derwin Gray, man. This guy has a little something to him. And I immediately thought of one offensive lineman when I saw him. I saw the way he moved, saw the way he played. One guy came to mind, and he was an undrafted player that has made it. And so he would be one of those guys that's in that 15% that I said that weren't starters that you got in the first 3 rounds because he was undrafted. And that's Donald Penn, the ex-Tampa Bay Buck, ex-Oakland Raider. He looks just like Donald Penn. I swear to you that if you looked at him and you watched him play, he could remind you of Donald Penn with the way that he approaches the game. But I thought that this guy has a little something to him, and he could end up being a quality player for the Steelers down the line. So in the 7th round, 219th pick overall, offensive lineman out of Maryland, Derwin Gray, for me, is... So as you can see, the Steelers did some yeoman-like work in this draft, man. No really porous picks. All of these guys, to me, fit what a Pittsburgh Steeler looks like, and there's somewhat of a DNA that you have to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, and I think these guys embody that. And so I think these guys can help the Steelers, and in certain cases, right away. I mean, you can get some immediate production. You're going to do that get that out of Devin Bush. Probably Deante Johnson as well. But even a guy like Zach Gentry, you may be able to get some immediate dividends paid off there. I could easily see a guy like Ulysses Gilbert giving you some special teams help in a pinch, jumping in the lineup and giving you something in a sub package as a linebacker. I mean, these things aren't out of the realm of possibility, man. I could see you getting some contributions. Justin Lane, to me, is going to step right in and be a stud in this league. I am convinced of that. I may be wrong, but I am convinced. Until I'm shown otherwise, Justin Lane is going to be a stud in this league. So Benny Snell as well. I think he's going to be a very quality acquisition and addition to the Steelers football team. And so I thought you did some really good things in this draft. Let's take a look at the score that you were able to accomplish. So not bad for the Steelers. That's going to do it for them and their 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up, and that's going to do it for me, your man Louie Tee, here on this Draft Wrap-Up series for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I thank you guys for joining me. Remember, if you haven't already done so, what are you waiting on? Subscribe to the Louie Tee Network for more great content. Make sure you turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing when we're talking Pittsburgh Steelers football or any of the other 31 teams in the National Football League. Also, make sure you check out the Louie Tee Network podcast. Great content there as well, available anywhere where a podcast can be found. It's available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website LouieTeeNetwork.net. So check that out as well. And make sure you rate and review the podcast. If you get a chance to listen and you like what you've heard and you want more, give me 5 stars, man. Come on, give it up. Let me have it. Give me them 5 stars, man. And review and rate the podcast. I can't thank you enough for the support I've been getting for the podcast. So with that being said, I'm your man Louie Tee, signing off. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. Until next time, I'm signing off. See you guys later.
Louie Tee Network.